Okay, so I have a student that comes to me on Thursdays, and I used to do classes for little kids too, like up through first grade and up. And she was with me probably starting in third grade, and she's in high school now. And she said, I told them this last week what I said to you, I think this will be the hardest book. She said, I've already read it, and it's not hard. And I said, well, thank you, Catherine. I guess I thought it would be more challenging because of being a poem.
Oh.
And poems don't tell you all the details and the facts necessarily. Poems evoke ideas, even though this poem is telling a story. But I'm glad to hear that. Go ahead.
I think it's because it's a poem that was easier for me to read. It's like the literature behind it, not the historical kind of style literature, but
yes.
The more poetic style is more it's easier for me to read. But this, I wasn't reading 3 chapters of kind of boringness. I was reading 3 chapters of something I was actually
See, I'm delighted to hear this. Maybe, unfortunately, though, that leaves me wondering which book we're going to read. You'll have to tell me so that in future years I can warn them. Maybe I shouldn't ever warn people. Maybe if I do, but it turns out to be easy, then, if you prepare for the worst and it's better than you think, that's never a bad thing, I think.
It was a little bit harder for me to read because it was a poem. So I had to keep myself on track a few times.
You gotta keep yourself on poem mode.
Poem mode.
Yes.
Well, you just have to keep focused. And so, sometimes, and I do this all the time, when I read a good lot. And I'm a pretty good reader, but my mind wanders. My mind wanders. And sometimes, and I have the weird ability to keep reading while my mind wanders. I mean, I even register the words. And so, and I've told you guys the story, when my children were young, I read out loud to them a lot. In fact, until some of them were college age and would come back in the summer, and we still had a family book going. But I also, when you have little kids, you get sleepy, you get really tired because they just never sleep. And I would fall asleep reading. And I would keep reading. And I don't know how. But then I would come back to the book, and then I would not recognize. And I would say, you already read that. You already read that. I'm like, well, where did I stop? Can you tell me what happened? Because I don't know. But one day I was reading some Civil War related book, and apparently a dinosaur appeared. Because I just started making things up in my sleep. So my kids would just whack me. Mom, you're falling asleep when something weird, or sometimes there were long pauses between words, So anyway, point being that many of us have a problem with our minds wandering, and when you notice it happening, maybe it's a sign you need to just step away for 5 minutes. Maybe you need to go get a drink or get a snack or something, walk around the room a couple of times and get back to it. But you can also train yourself to just tell those thoughts, leave me alone. I'm reading now, but I'm still working on that. That's difficult. Yeah.
My dad does that all the time to fall asleep.
See, I feel better.
Just slur all his words.
Yes, yes.
We can't understand anything that he's saying. He just gets quieter and quieter and slurs all of his words. It's like, I don't even know what you're saying anymore. Like, can you go back like 5 minutes?
Okay, so if you are finding the Aeneid easy, I am overjoyed. And if you are not, because you need to stay in poem mode, as you said, you need to just keep track, keep focused. You can train yourself to do this. We can train ourselves to do all sorts of things. We can train ourselves to read hard things. We can train ourselves to run marathons. We can train ourselves to go on American Ninja Warrior. I can't.
That's impossible.
Maybe if I really worked, but I'm not going to try. I don't want it bad enough. I want to start out today by looking at your reading guide on page 7. If everybody would open up to that for me. And I put another excerpt from Virgil in here. And we're going to spend, 10 or 15 minutes with it. Last week we read a section, we read from his eclogues. We read the 4th eclogue, where he just very enigmatically talked about some wonderful child that was going to be born to the world, who was going to bring peace and prosperity, and nature was going to be restored, and we don't know what to make of that.
Instead of plants.
Yes. The Georgics, it actually comes from the Greek word which means land. It literally means working the land. And it's farming advice in general, although this is not farming advice, because that is very interesting.
So it's more plant stuff?
Yes, he was very into plant stuff, lots of plant stuff. This was fashionable. Like, I'm trying to think of a fad. What's a book that there are a lot of? The James Patterson books, or doesn't he write a book like every 6 months or something, and he's advertising it on TV? I've never read any of these, but you know, sometimes certain types of literature are in fashion. In his time, farms were in fashion. That was the place to be, yes. It's okay, you just ate an Oreo, that's still fine.
Thinking back to the Messianic eclogue, poor Romans. This guy who usually talks about farming and stuff suddenly comes out with this super random.
Yes.
Like, I wouldn't know what to even make of it.
No, I'm not sure they did either. But this is from Georgic 2. And here's what I want to do. I just want to give you a taste of it. Because you know what, the church fathers, the early church, they knew all of this. They loved Virgil. Throughout the Middle Ages, Virgil was revered, and his poetry, and this is an English translation obviously, but was considered to be just prime. And I just feel like knowing a little bit would be interesting. But there's some interesting points that he makes. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read a section at a time. But before I read a section, I'm going to ask you a question to listen for. Okay? So you're going to listen to the question, and then you're going to, as I read, you're going to listen for the answer. All right? There's not just necessarily one answer. So the first section, I want you to listen for. How does knowledge of what he calls hidden causes and of the gods of the country, how does that help us? Why does he think we should investigate the causes of nature and all the gods of the country? What good does it do us? That's what you're listening for. Here we go. Happy who have the skill to understand nature's hid causes, and beneath his feet all terrors cast, and death's relentless doom, and the loud roar of greedy Acheron. Blessed too is he who knows the rural gods, Pan, old Sylvanus, and the sister nymphs. Him nor the rods of public power can bend, nor kingly purple, nor fierce feud that drives brother to turn on brother, nor descent of Dacian from the Danube's leagued flood, nor Rome's great state, nor kingdoms like to die, nor hath he grieved through pitying of the poor, nor envied him that hath. What good does it do us? What's one thing, Ethan?
First off, what I'm hearing from Virgil is that none of this stuff happens for no reason.
Yes.
No reason.
There are reasons behind everything, yes.
So the good of finding the cause behind it is so that we can prevent it.
Okay.
This looks like a prophecy almost like a hidden message that God used to relay sin.
Because if you know the reasons behind what happens, you can short circuit it. Also, maybe it doesn't affect you as much. What did you find, Alex?
Oh gosh, hold on.
That's okay.
Okay, him nor the rods of public power can bend. Studying this farming, well, it gives food, and so it supports the entire public power. If a people have a good agricultural system, then they can devote all the time they want not into getting food, but preserving peace, going into the arts, because they're not struggling to survive.
Very good. Does anyone want to add something else? Does anyone want to go a different direction? I'm seeing that some of the things that don't touch him, not only the rods of kings, but feud that drives brother to turn on brother, or descent of Dacian barbarians, like invaders. He doesn't grieve through pitying the poor, but he doesn't envy the rich. He doesn't envy him who have. It seems to me, I love what both of you guys have to say, but it also seems to me that it just makes you calm about things. When the barbarian descends, when the king orders something to be done, you in yourself have a calm of, I mean, if we were to put it, because I am not trying to say Virgil is writing as a Christian, okay? I want to be perfectly plain. But it's something that Christians can get on board with, because we would call that the Holy Spirit dwelling within us. Gives us the peace that passes understanding, you know? But he thinks it comes from knowledge and a relationship with the gods of the country. And being in tune. Well, don't we kind of do that today? We go camping, and we go stay in a cabin in the woods, and we're getting back to nature, and we're gonna leave all our technology at home, you know, and we're just gonna decompress, you know, from the modern world. And I think maybe he's saying that too. Very good. Let's look at the next section. Here's my question for the next section. What does Virgil think about chasing worldly wealth and advancement? You can probably get already a hint of how he feels about it, but let me read the next section. What fruit the boughs and what the fields of their own bounteous will have borne, he gathers. Nor iron rule of laws, nor maddened forum have his eyes beheld, nor archives of the people. Others vex the darksome gulfs of ocean with their oars, or rush on steel. They press within the courts and doors of princes. One with havoc falls upon a city, and its hapless hearths, from gems to drink, on Tyrian rugs to lie. This hoards his wealth, and broods o'er buried gold. One at the rostra stares in blank amaze. The rostra would be the place of public business. The answering cheers of the plebs and senate rolled along the benches. Bathed in brothers' blood, men revel, and all delights of hearth and home for exile exchanging. A new country seek beneath an alien sun. Is he pro chasing after power and wealth, or is he anti-chasing power and wealth?
Anti.
Yeah,
Definitely anti. He's basically just saying, for the love of money, the root of all evil. You know, chasing after money as your main goal will lead to bloodshed and other things.
And exile at the end. You cause enough trouble. And this is something the Romans did, by the way. They didn't really imprison people long term. It was more, we put you there until we either kill you or send you away. But prison wasn't a thing, like life in prison. Exile was a big thing. Okay, you don't behave, you can't ever come back to Rome. You can't even set foot in Italy. Boom, make a new home. We saw this, you guys who were with me last year, we saw the Greeks doing this, exiling, ostracizing people from Athens. Yeah, Alex, what did you want?
Writing off of the calm that he was saying you could experience by working the land and by obeying its gods, chasing after such things as wealth leads to a very chaotic, restless, unhappy life. And,
it does.
And one of the most disturbing parts of this poem is bathed in brothers' blood. They revel.
They revel in it.
In the end, your brain will justify all of these evils because you have set your wealth and your comfort above all other morality.
And remember, I mentioned last week that Virgil grew up in a world where this was happening all the time, where these generals kept coming in with their armies, one after another, and just basically wiping out all the opposition. And sometimes these generals were related to each other by marriage Pompey the Great married Julius Caesar's daughter. Julius Caesar was Pompey's father-in-law until she died. These people were related to each other more than once, and they were killing each other.
Alex, is it brain or is it gut? Remember last year? The brain.
It would be the appetite.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yes.
I don't know, I just wanted to bring that from last year.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to add anything? Let's take a look at the next section. My question is, do you think Virgil idealizes country life? So by idealize, I mean makes it sound better than it really is in reality. Like if I idealize Christmas time, oh, my beautiful children will come home, and we will calmly open gifts, and everybody will say, oh, thank you, and we'll just neatly eat the cookies, and we will never eat so much that we feel sick later, because that's gluttony, and that's not a virtue, and everything will be joyous, and then my kids come, and then my son starts moving nativity scene pieces around to irritate his sister, and sometimes like battle droids end up in the nativity scene, and then he likes to put a wreath on the nutcracker's head, which also drives the same sister crazy. And then it's like, well, you didn't make this kind of cookie, and this is the reality, and this is the reality. Are you opening my mind? I idealize it. Yes.
What was the question?
The question is, do you think Virgil idealizes living in the country?
Yes.
I think so too, but let's read, and then we'll answer. The husbandman with hooked plowshare turns the soil. From hence springs his year's labor. Hence too he sustains country and cottage homestead, and from hence his herds of cattle and deserving steers. No respite, still the year overflows with fruit, or young of kine are cattle, or Ceres wheaten sheaf, with crops the furrow loads and burst the barns. Winter is come. In olive mills they bruise the Siconian berry, which is olives. Acorn cheered the swine troop homeward. Woods their arbutes yield. So various fruit sheds autumn, and high up on sunny rocks the mellowing vintage bakes. Meanwhile, about his lips sweet children cling. His chaste house keeps its purity, his kine drop milky udders, and on the lush green grass fat kids are striving. That'd be goats, not his children. Fat kids are striving, horn to budding horn. Himself keeps holy days, stretched o'er the sward, where round the fire his comrades crown the bowl. He pours libation, and thy name invokes, Aeneas, and for the herdsman on an elm sets up a mark for a swift javelin. They strip their tough bodies for rustic sport. It's like Thanksgiving, and then you go out and play football, like flag football or something.
Except
Maybe
this
before you
football
eat.
is a point. You
Yes,
can
except
fly
this has a javelin, and you need to be careful with that. Does anybody here farm or know someone who farms? Okay.
Yes.
Is it always just glory and
No.
wonder? No,
No,
it's so not. First of all, at the very, very least, animals don't smell very good. Let's just face it.
No.
Okay? My
My dog
grandparents
smells horrible.
farmed
She
pig.
needs
Well,
to
we were
wash.
talking about farm animals too. My grandparents had raised pigs when I was little. And my grandma, she'd pull into the driveway and she said, smells like money. Because, they were getting ready to take the pigs to market. But I also know that my grandma never opened her windows. Like they always had the AC on, because you don't want to. No, it's not always happy. What if there's a drought? What if there's too much rain? Every year, my uncle still farms. He's like 80 years old and he's still farming. He's like, oh, we got too much rain this year. Oh, it's flooding in the bottoms. And my dad, who did not stay to farm, said, they're always complaining. There's never enough rain or always too much, but it always turns out okay. But it doesn't always turn out okay, You are at the mercy of the elements. You are at the mercy of acts of God. More than the rest of us. We control our climate and we control our atmosphere. But farmers, one sickness can wipe out half your animals. So yes, go ahead.
And all of that is true. But It gives you usually a much calmer, more simple life. If you're, I mean, I'm just looking at politics and like being a politician.
Well, that's a
Well,
mistake, so.
yeah, that would be a really complicated, possibly even dangerous life. As a farmer, you are providing for your community, and you, the stuff that you grow is the stuff that you eat. So you can trust in your own ability to do things, and you don't have to rely on others. So you're pretty much self-sufficient.
You are, but at the same time you have the anxiety because so much is outside of your control.
Yes.
The weather or illness or what have you. I mean, if the farmer, I know a homeschooling family, and the mom of the family grew up on a dairy farm, and they live still next to the dairy farm. When my kids were little, it was a homeschool chalk. Back in the day when I was in chalk, we went to visit this dairy farm, and it's they have machinery to milk the cows. They have enough cows that they don't milk by hand twice a day. And she said, my parents haven't been anywhere in 20 years. Because you got to milk the cows twice a day. They're not happy. And you bring them all in, bring them into the shed, hook them up to the machinery, drive them back out. And so, so I agree though that it's more of a calmer cycle.
Yeah, he says
there's
no
still
rest.
anxiety. There's still anxiety. But there's a calmer cycle, and he goes through that cycle. He goes through summer, autumn, then when everything's in the barn, and hopefully your barn is bursting at the seams, then you can go out and throw the javelin and have a little sporting event. Yeah.
I don't need a counter argument. The government controls a lot about agriculture.
I'm just going to interrupt you, but modern agriculture is different than once upon a time. Did any of you ever read the book The Ox Cart Man when you were little? It's a picture book about a man, the farm year, and it's just very simple, and he just does the same thing each year, and he takes his produce to market, and then he sells the ox, and he sells the cart, and then he goes back, and he's got young oxen in the stall for next year, and he starts making a new cart, and he does it over again. But it's hard work. Okay, here's our last section. Why is this sort of life the most beneficial life? And it may sound like a repeat of what we've said before, but you're going to hear something else, okay? Such life of yore the ancient Sabines led. The Sabines were the original people in Italy, okay? Such Remus and his brother. Etruria thus, doubt not, to greatness grew, and Rome became the fair world's fairest, and with circling wall clasped to her single breast the sevenfold hills. Aye, ere the reign of Dicty's king, ere men waxed godless, banqueted on slaughtered bulls, such life on earth did golden Saturn lead, nor ear of man had heard the war trump's blast, nor clang of sword on stubborn anvil set. Why, what's his proof that this life is the best life? What do you think, Alex?
If everyone was a farmer, no one would really want to go to war.
Okay.
Right, isn't that what the last
But he's also talking about, he's looking back to Saturn's reign. Saturn's reign is the golden age of mankind, when there was no war and everything was perfect. What do you think, Tatum?
I think that last is kind of explaining that if you live out on the farm out in the country, then you don't hear all the outside noise of cities and of what's going on. It's just more peaceful.
This is true. It is, and cultivating that peace and calm in you changes you. And if each person is changed like that, you could change society. Does anybody else see something? Here's what I notice. Etruria thus to greatness grew, and Rome became the world's fairest. How did Rome become so great? Because that's what we used to be like. But we're not like that anymore. Which is why we kind of stink. Why we, in his, for most of his life, Rome was not a good place to be. Rome was not a thing to be so proud of. because of so much violence. He said, this is the way they used to be. It's sort of like us, hearkening back to the founding fathers and, you know, Washington and Jefferson or whatever on their plantations, on their farms, and George Washington, our hero, because he came and served his country and then he went back to private life when he was done. He said, I'm not going to be president again. He didn't want to be president the first time. I'm going back. I'm going back to my rural life and living in the country. And we idealize that too, because we see what happens when we, I don't know, get out of touch with nature. So anyway, this gives you an idea of how Virgil feels about the past of Rome, that it was a rural past, that it was tough farmers. We're going to read a lot about these people in our next book after we finish the Aeneid, these early Romans and what life was like for them. All right, so I forgot to show you last week's art of the week. For those of you who haven't done the high school class before or are new here, I like to bring in some piece of art every week just to enlighten what we're talking about, and I just totally forgot to show it to you. Just like I forgot to show those pictures to the junior high kids. But the painting I didn't show you, I will bring next week because it enlightens what you're going to read, this books 4 through 6. But it did bring this painting. This painting is called Aeneas and Anchises. It's by an artist named Leonello Spada, painted in 1615, and it's in the Louvre in Paris. And in this painting, we see Aeneas, our hero. And he is hoisting this old man, his dad Anchises, onto his back because Troy is burning down. We got to get out, but we don't leave anybody behind. I got my dad, I've got my young son, sometimes he's called Ascanius, sometimes he's called Eulus. You just get used to it. And unfortunately, his wife, Creusa, who, as you know, is not going to make it out of Troy. She's going to get separated from them and die in some unknown, undisclosed way and place, and come back as a spirit and tell Aeneas, hightail it out of here, because it's going down. That is not a direct quote. And the reason I chose this picture is because this really illustrates Aeneas's defining trait. Aeneas, I'm going to pass these around for time constraints, but if you ever, I'm just going to lay these out if you ever want to come take a closer look. Aeneas is described as Pious or Pious Aeneas, which is a nice rhyming thing. In English, we spell this word with an extra vowel, because why not put an extra vowel in things? Why do we do that? What does it mean to be pious? What do we usually mean by that word?
We discussed this at great length last year. I don't remember anything.
That's okay. Well, I'm so glad we're discussing it again. Sometimes I have to discuss things 5 or 6 times before I remember them. What do we mean by pious?
Is that the religious pious?
Yes.
Okay.
What do people, okay, so I guess this is my real question. Modern Americans, if they describe someone as pious, what do they generally mean? What do you think, Alex?
Devotion to religion or a god or a moral compass.
Okay, usually a religion.
Yes.
Usually a religion. So I asked this question yesterday, and I was surprised by the answer, and maybe I'll be surprised again. So, do you think most people use this as a good thing or a bad thing? If they say someone is very pious, like if it says, okay, in what way? Like what does it make you? Okay, so can you expand? Like selfish.
Greedy in their desires.
Okay, and maybe they're using religion as a cover for it?
Yeah.
Okay, Karsten, what do you want to add?
Like people, especially people who are like atheists or like, I don't know what it's called, that like New Age, all that like
Yes.
spiritual naturalism stuff. it's like, we don't like religion because religion sucks. And so you like religion, so you're a bad person.
Yeah. Because maybe equating it with being superstitious a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Superstitious isn't a positive.
No, superstitious is not a positive thing.
I don't usually hear it anymore, like pious, that word, but
Don't use it very often.
back then it meant a good thing.
Okay, back then it did.
And then it got a little corrupted, and pious could mean sure devotion to a religion, but then what are all those other pious people doing? They're using, like even the late church was using religion, the Roman Catholic Church, to rule all of Europe.
Yes, yes.
And to quell thinkers like Galileo, I believe. And now, whenever someone says, usually an atheist says, oh, you are pious or religious, that usually means goody two shoes, you think you think you're better than me.
Yes, I like to put these ideas together. Goody two shoes, you think you're better than me, you like to tell me what to do. Well, I wouldn't read that book. I wouldn't go to that movie. You like to tell people what to do. And you, because of selfishness, you're using your religion as a block to basically push people around and tell them and just be kind of hoity-toity. That is not what it means, but that is what it is turned into. Yeah.
I think it's the Muslim religion. They were very pious people, and they used their religion as an excuse to like fight a war against everybody.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and with all respect to what Alex said too, so did the Christian church. So have Christians. We are all guilty. Every religion probably has people guilty of this. You know, honestly, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were using religion as a guise to tell people.
I mean, you just look at the Crusades. It was a pious people, a corrupted pious people, going after another corrupted pious people, and then
the whole thing is ugly.
Yeah.
All right, one more comment. Ethan has a comment.
I never thought of Pious as a bad thing, because I always thought of Pious as, a biblical person.
Yes.
That's an interesting perspective from a person who's probably not religious or is religious to the point where they want to call it religious.
Yeah, so this was the response yesterday. It's like, oh, I never thought of pious as being a bad thing. And I'm so glad you haven't heard it used as a disparaging way, but you probably will. Like, he's so pious. He would never do that. You know, that sort of kind of mocking. I don't know if you have to say it in a nasally way like that, but a mocking thing. Kyle, did you want to say something?
Yes. So I like how some people are trying to be religious for more status in like places. Like how there's I saying I'm Christian for different things.
Yes.
Just to get that status of being like pious or whatever.
But okay, one more comment. Okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Usually when I hear, oh, you think your way of life is better than mine, I start laughing because that is literally Christianity is literally the best way to live.
Yes.
And
the answer is yes, I do. I do think it is better. It's a better way of life.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why I do it. That's why anybody does anything. They think it's better. Why do we choose anything? Because we think it's better, right? So today we tend to think of pious as being, you mentioned Muslims, but, and maybe this is because America, generally Christian piety and often in a disparaging way. But we generally, if we're going to take away the negative and just only think positive, it means that you're religious in the best way possible. You are God-fearing. You want to observe what God told you because Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. That's the reason we keep them. We love him, right? The Romans, of course, they didn't know the one true God. This piety involved reverence for the gods, but it was almost more like a sense of duty. And I mean, and duty also gets a bad rap. Sometimes we, you know, oh, I just do it because it's my duty. I don't really want to do it. But duty meant doing what the gods call you to do and reverencing them and your parents. Piety was also towards one's parents, because children have a duty to their parents. Honor your mother and your father, even though that's from the Bible, not from Rome. It was still a legitimate idea, and most people in the world have said, you should honor your father and your mother, at least your father. You know, sometimes moms don't get the best. But
what do you
most
mean
people,
sometimes? You have to honor your mother and father.
I know. I mean, there are some societies. In which moms aren't as revered as the dad. So when Aeneas takes his dad on his shoulders, this is a very pious act. He is honoring his father. And this is a man, Aeneas, he's going to be marked by a man who does his duty. And I'm going to bring that up again and again. He's called over and over as Pious Aeneas. Now, I want to bring up one other thing while we're still looking at this picture. Now you have to think not literally, but metaphorically now, okay? If your father could be a symbol of something, could stand for something, what is something one's own father could stand for? A hero. That's really good. And Anchises is a hero to Aeneas. And Aeneas, well, you already know Anchises is dead because he died at the end of book 3. You're not done with Anchises. He's actually going to come back and help his son, because they do that. You know, sometimes they come back. So yes, your hero, and that makes you want to do your duty to them. What else could it represent?
An example.
An example.
A leader.
A leader.
It could represent most of the wisdom and virtue that you've learned so far.
Okay,
If you
and
use them as an example.
from whom did your father learn that? From whom did your father learn to be a hero?
From his father.
From his father. Who did he learn it from?
His father.
What is this thing that we're describing? Your dad and your grandpa and your great-grandpa and your
A legacy?
Your legacy. And when did these people live? When did they live with respect to you? In the past. They lived in the past. Everything everybody said, I agree with 100%. But I was fishing for the past. Aeneas takes the past, the whole burden of the past on his shoulders. If your dad is the past, what is your son?
The future.
The future. Aeneas is caught in between two places, isn't he? He was awesome at Troy. Okay, he was one of the great Trojan warriors. Yeah, he got whisked out of the battle by his mom and everything. But he was looked up to. He was respected. He was a cousin of Hector and Paris and all the other crew of all the sons. And he has the weight of that. He has been told, you're going to save Troy. You're not going to save this Troy because it's burning down, but you're going to take a bunch of refugee Trojans with you, and you're going to go start a new dynasty, and you're going to rule the world. And you are taking, did you notice what else they got? The things that they look like little babies? The Lares and Penates, the gods. You are the bearer of the past. You are the bearer of our gods. You are the bearer, all those things, of the memory of our heroes, of our legacy, of everything that came before. It's all on you, Aeneas. But he's also got this son, and he's got to go into the future. And he's like, oh, shoot. You know, when we start this poem, he's not even sure where Italy. He doesn't even know it's Italy. Like, go somewhere. Yay, that's helpful. Thank you so much for being so
Thanks,
specific.
gods.
Go away. What?
Oh, I think, oh gosh,
Yes.
Yeah, same
It
deal.
reminded me, I mentioned this yesterday, it reminds me very much of Abraham. Can you imagine? I am the real God. I want you to go somewhere. Where? Oh, you'll know when you get there. I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
I'll tell you when you get there.
So, beautiful or?
I would be very, very frustrated.
It was frustrating. I mean, Abraham is a great hero of the faith, but I can't imagine that there weren't mornings when he got up and said, really, we're not there yet? This is not it? Haran was not it? Okay, so the first question I asked you, and so you can follow along in your books, you know, if there's a question you couldn't find the answer to, you can jot it down while we're here in class. First one I basically gave you the answer to last week. I asked you what is the opening line, and how does it tell you what this poem's about?
War and peace.
War, I sing of arms, not, weapons, and a man. I'm going to sing you an Iliad, all about war, and an Odyssey, all about a man. And when we meet Aeneas, we've dropped in the middle. Remember, I warned you we were just going to be dropped in the middle of the action. He's out in the ocean, no backstory yet. He is seen by Juno. And we talked about this last week. Juno hates him because, she didn't get that golden apple. The whole golden apple thing is still rankling her. And there's another reason. And this, I'll just tell you, if your book looks like mine, I'm just going to tell you the page I'm on, if you want to follow. Okay, Ethan, I'll tell you the line number. I'll do both, okay? So I'm on page 4, line 30, book 1. She had heard long since that generations born of Trojan blood would one day overthrow her Tyrian walls. Walls built by a lady from Tyre, that would be Dido, queen of Carthage. And from that blood a race would come in time with ample kingdoms, arrogant in war for Libya's ruin. Juno's heard a rumor. Someday these blasted Roman guys are going to come whoop up on my Carthage. And Carthage is my baby. I love Carthage.
Where is his son and wife and dad in all of this? He's at the beginning of the book, Juno shipwrecks him.
Yes.
And then he has to swim to shore. No. Is there one surviving boat?
No, there's more than one surviving boat.
Okay.
Does that help?
And they escape to shore. Where is his family?
His dad has died in Sicily at the end of book 3.
Okay.
Because remember, book 2 and 3, we're going to get the backstory. Dido's going to say, oh, you're the famous Aeneas. Tell me all about your travels. And then he's going to spend 2 books telling the backstory. And we find out that Anchises has died. Ascanius is there. He's back at the ships initially, but I don't know if he was on the same ship. He just doesn't get mentioned for a while.
All right.
But he's there.
Also, just to make sure that I have it right, he gets shipwrecked, swims to Carthage, or swims or sails, whatever, to Carthage.
He gets there.
Is given a feast, and then he
tells the story.
Yeah, in the presence of Dido,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes. Just like Odysseus visits Nausicaa's parents in Phaeacia in the Odyssey and just tells the whole for 4 books. And then
Man, this really is fan fiction.
so it is. And so line, I don't know, like 49, 48. The famous comment, I'm starting on 46. For years they wandered, as their destiny drove them on from one sea to the next. So hard and huge a task it was to found the Roman people. Remember, the whole point of this poem is we're going to get everybody just cheered up about being Roman. This is going to be our poem. So hard, huge a task it was to found the Roman people. This isn't just any people that's being founded here. And so he shows up after the storm. I'm going to pass over the storm, just like in the Odyssey, gods and goddesses are stirring up storms and wrecking your boats, like Alex mentioned. They do like to do that. And, I still have my clock, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to pace us well. For those of you who read the Iliad and the Odyssey with me last year, you might remember the idea of an epic simile. And I don't know if you noticed this. Ethan has a favorite. An epic simile in Homer is when you do a simile, two things are the same, but the second thing you just go on and on and on about. So instead of saying no, I'm trying to think of what the bees buzzed like like helicopters. Okay, this is a bad simile, but I'm thinking on the fly. But it would be like this: the bees buzzed like helicopters. When in the middle of a war, they swoop down and they land on the ground with soldiers tumbling out of the sides of the helicopter and then rappelling out of the sides as the blades whirl around and around and the birds get in the. I don't know. It keeps going on and on and on. I don't think birds and helicopters is in there. That was a bad choice. Ethan, you've got a favorite, don't you? Okay, Ethan's going to give us an epic simile. See if it's the one I marked. Let him, he loves to read.
Give us one on the fly, come on.
Let him do it.
Now like a wolf pack, out for blood on a foggy night, driven blindly on by relentless, rabid hunger, leaving cubs behind, waiting, jaws parched. So through spears, through enemy ranks we plow to certain death, striking into the city's heart, the shielding wings of the darkness beating round us.
Yes. It's not just like a lion on the prowl. It's like a lion that's left the lion cubs at home, she's out hunting. And, okay, I'm not going to read mine. Mine was, but that's the idea. So be on the lookout for those. Sometimes, okay, in Homer, if you guys remember who read with me last year, sometimes they're so long you can't remember what we're talking about once you get to the end. It's like, what are we even talking about now? You have to go back to the beginning. These aren't quite as bad, but another connection for us, right, with Homer, between Virgil and Homer. But he gets to Carthage, and I would like to point out to you, let me find it. Oh, actually, can we talk about something else first? I forgot things yesterday, so I'm just going to go through the book. Let's talk about our next question. So the action goes back and forth, just like it does in the Iliad, right? Sometimes we're on Earth, and then suddenly we're in Olympus, and the gods are having conferences. Sometimes they're having arguments. A lot of times they're having arguments. A lot of arguments there.
He's right. I don't think they're gods at all. I think they're demigods.
I think they're even worse than that, yes. So Aphrodite, Venus, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep calling them Greek names because right before you guys I'm doing Greece with the kids and I'll keep botching it. Venus is distressed, and that's putting it really mildly, because Juno will not leave, remember? Aeneas is her son, Venus' son. Hera, Juno will not leave him alone. He's like, you destroyed the whole city, and now she won't leave my son alone, and you said he was going to be okay, and you're not keeping your promises, and I'm just so upset.
If I was Venus' mother, I wouldn't care at all, because she's a god.
She doesn't have
Yeah.
Oh, that's even worse. She's an orphan.
She's a little whiny. But God, hey, shh. Guys, what does Jupiter tell her to calm her down? That was the next question. What does Jupiter promise her? Big, long promise. What do you think, Alex?
The city, she was promised that Aeneas will be able to land in a place called Italy and bring up a giant city called
Yes.
Rome.
He will make it to Italy. He will build a great city. But he doesn't stop with the promises there. Anybody catch anything else that gets promised? I'm going to read it. I'm on page 13. Book 1, line 370. Afterward, he's talking about Romulus and Remus eventually being born. Afterward, happy in the tawny pelt his nurse the she-wolf wears, young Romulus will take the leadership, build walls of Mars, and call his own name, by his own name, his people Romans. Listen to this. For these I set no limits, world or time, but make the gift of empire without end. Ethan, do you see where I am?
No.
Oh, okay, because your bless your line numbers are going to be different than mine, I bet. I'm on page 13. In my the softback, I'm on line 3. I started on line 370.
Oh.
In Fitzgerald.
Unfortunate, because I do not know where.
I'm gonna read that again. And I'm sorry. So Ethan, I'm gonna be very little help to you. It's fine. Okay. For these I set no limits, world or time, but make the gift of empire without end. I promise you an everlasting kingdom. No boundaries in the world, no geographical boundaries. They get it all. No time boundaries. They get to rule forever. I make no boundaries. That's pretty huge. It's like, listen, Venus, put up with a little bit of malarkey happening to your son now. He's going to have some hardship, but he's going to found a people that's going to rule the whole world forever. Oh, okay. Can you tell me just those 2 lines? How does Fagel say it?
It's very long. This is very long.
Just the empire without end part.
Wait, what?
Just the couple of lines where he talks about the empire without end. I would come to you if I weren't tethered.
Here, the fate of your children stands unchanged, I swear. You will see your promised city, seal Lebanon's walls, and bear your great-hearted Aeneas up to the stars on high.
Oh, I think you're past me.
Am I?
Don't worry.
Okay.
You know what? Don't worry about it. We're gonna. I'm sorry, Ethan. We're gonna move on just for time constraints. I was just curious how he translated it. So he goes on to tell him to prophesy. Julius Caesar, Augustus. He's telling Venus the great Romans that are going to arise. Yes, Karsten.
Isn't Venus the one who went on the battlefield and like got
Yes, and got her hand stabbed, and then she went boo-hoo to daddy. Yes. Listen to what else he promises. This is on the same page. This is the bottom of the page. The gates of war will then be shut. Inside, unholy furor, squatting on cruel weapons, hands enchained behind him by 100 links of bronze, will grind his teeth and howl with bloodied mouth. He says, someday, the gates of war are going to be shut. It's going to be war, but someday there's going to be peace. Let me finish this idea. Don't forget what you're going to say.
Yep.
So remember who asked Virgil to write this poem? Augustus Caesar, avenger of Julius Caesar was already dead. Augustus Caesar, avenger of his granduncle. They had a temple. It was the temple of Janus, a god that sometimes is shown with 2 faces looking the 2 opposite ways. And whenever Rome was at war anywhere, they opened the gates to the temple. Whenever there was peace, they shut the gates. Well, if you know anything at all about Roman history, you can guess that the gates were open almost all the time, because they're always fighting somebody, except under Augustus.
It was shut.
The gates of war will be shut. This is a shout out to Augustus.
That's
The gates
exactly
of
what
war
I was
will be
gonna
shut. Jupiter is telling Venus all about Augustus, the guy who asked Virgil to write this poem, which is kind of awesome. Yes, I'm sorry. What were you going to say now?
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
It's like, you better write something about me. I'm the best.
So he shows up, and just a second. Okay, so he shows up at Carthage and he starts checking it out. They're building a new city. We hear the backstory of poor Dido. Her her brother killed her husband, and then her husband's ghost appeared to her and said, hey, I buried a bunch of treasure under the ground, here's where it is, go dig it up, and then you need to get out of here, because your brother is dangerous, and you don't even know he killed me. Like, he hid my body. So get out of here while the getting's good. Take your sister and go build a new city somewhere. So she did. And that somewhere is the north coast of Africa. I should bring my Mediterranean map so you can see. Carthage is it's not very far across from Italy to Carthage. And she's building this city there at Carthage. And at a moment when Venus, do you remember Venus appears to him like a hunter girl?
Oh, yeah.
You know? And doesn't just say, I'm your mom. It's too easy. It's like, oh, I'm a hunter girl looking for my hunter friends and my sister. But he figures out who she is. And he describes himself for the first time like this. I am Aeneas, duty bound. I am Pious Aeneas. I have a duty to perform. I have to go found this new city. You know, I would like to just go back to the very beginning. I'm not going to even tell you where this is. But in the middle of the storm, we read this line. Aeneas, on the instant, felt his knees go numb and slack, and stretched his hands to heaven, groaning out, and then he yells something about, oh, I wish I had died with all my friends at Troy, because now I'm going to drown out on the sea, and there's no glory in that. I don't know if he did it like that. That's me. Apparently that's me whining. Aeneas felt his limbs go numb and slack with fear. Now, I want to ask you, those of you who read the Odyssey and the Iliad with me, or just knowing about Trojan War, can you imagine the warrior Achilles ever being described like that? His legs went slack and he was numb with fear.
Now he would go wax something.
No, I'm just like, I just go out on the ramparts and I scream at all of you and you all run. And then I just come and I kill you. Either I kill you or you get whisked away by a god. The two choices when Achilles is chasing you, right? Death or whisking. No. Third option. Everybody dies. He never gets afraid. He gets upset. But he never goes slack with fear. You know, Aeneas, he was great on the battlefield and everything, but Aeneas is still, you know, we meet Aeneas and he's really, because his dad is, at this point in the book, his dad has already died, but he's still really in the past. Oh, my friends are dead at Troy. Hector's dead. Paris is dead. Priam is dead. Hecuba's dead. Cassandra's, I guess he doesn't know she's dead yet, but she's dead too. You know, my.
Wait, how did she die?
With Agamemnon in the bath.
What?
I thought only Agamemnon died.
No.
So did they drown in the
Oh, yeah,
bath?
ask me later. No, butchered by the wife. Ask me later.
Oh.
My whole family is dead. Wish I was dead too. I wish I back there was where it was good. My home was Troy, and I burned it down. I hate this. I hate all of this. He's bound to the past. You know, he keeps looking behind him. Makes me think of Lot's wife. Looking behind him all the time. That didn't turn out well for her. What did you want to say?
Something that I really admire about the Aeneid is that in the Iliad, these guys were godlike. They would go through the ranks just cutting people down. Here, you see humanity. This guy is terrified, but he's going to push forward because he's Pious Aeneas, duty bound.
He is carried through not by his like God endowment or superhumanness, but by his sense of duty. I have to do this.
That really carries with the Roman.
It does.
Morality.
It's not very big. So he shows up and he says on, I keep taking the balls off. On 19, he sees the Carthage and he says, oh, how fortunate these are whose city walls are rising here and now. I wish I had a city. I used to have a city. Burnt it down. This is an awesome city. Hold on to that idea, because you know what? Maybe he could stay there. It could be his city too, maybe. But the very first thing that he encounters is kind of weird. It says he finds a temple planned in Juno's honor. Very first building he admires, temple to Juno. How does Juno feel about Aeneas? Red flag. Do not stay in the place with the big temple to Juno. These people will not be your friends. This will not end well. And it's so funny because he goes around, you know, the carved statues in relief on the sides of the temple, and he's looking, and it's the story of the Trojan War. He sees himself. He sees Priam and Hecuba, his aunt and uncle, they would be. He sees Hector being dragged around behind the chariot by Achilles. He sees all the woes of Troy. And he says, famously, it's not very pretty when you translate it literally. Sunt lacrimae rerum. Here there are tears of things. That's like, oh, that's poetic. Love that. But it means here's a place where they weep for the bad things that happen in the world. So Robert Fitzgerald says, hang on, they weep here for how the world goes. Here there are the tears of things. Because you know what? I'm bummed. I just want to go somewhere where they will be compassionate, where they will feel sorry for me a little bit. Don't you like people to feel sorry for you sometimes a little bit?
Yeah.
Sometimes a little bit. You kind of wallow in it a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to drag yourself out of it because they go, oh, my home is gone. But here they all are living again on this temple, the temple of Juno, who hates me. But here they all are again. And look, she's building a city. This is awesome. I wish I could just stay here. And then I could have a city, and I wouldn't have to go through all the bad stuff that they keep telling me is going to happen in the future. I don't want to do that. I'm done. But I have a duty. Okay, so Venus and Hera hatch a plan, right? Let's make Dido, the queen of Carthage, fall in love with Aeneas. Venus calls her son Cupid and says, go shoot her. Shoot her with one of those love arrows. In fact, we're just gonna turn you into Ascanius, and then when you climb up on her lap and she's just playing, and just get her. And this is a win for Venus because her son won't be harassed by the Carthaginians. And this is a win for Juno because maybe Aeneas won't leave. And if he doesn't leave, he can't found Rome. He can't found that dynasty. And if Rome never gets built, then they won't ever attack Carthage. And Carthage will never be destroyed. So maybe we can cut a deal. And they do. So Dido falls in love with Aeneas. And she says, oh, Aeneas. I think this happens before. Maybe not. But I just picture her just like she's, like in cartoons when their eyes are just spinning in a spiral. And she's just doing, tell me all about Troy. Tell me all about your wonderful adventures. And he does. He spends 2 books, doesn't he, telling us the story. In book 2, we finally, we read the Iliad and we didn't get to hear it. And we read the Odyssey and we kind of heard the Greek side. But this is the Trojan version of the Trojan horse story. It doesn't go well for the Trojan side at all. Yes.
This is where I wonder, where is his wife? If a princess just fell in love with him.
She died at Troy.
Oh, no,
okay.
Didn't she escape?
No. Okay, we'll get to that.
He died.
Guys, let's do our next question. Okay, good. So I asked you, so Troy is burning down. We all know the story. If we didn't know it before, we just read it. The Greeks packed a bunch of soldiers inside an enormous wooden horse, tricked the Trojans into dragging it within the walls, breaking down some of their walls in the process. And then the traitor lets them out at night, unhooks the little latch of the trapdoor. They all jump out, they let their friends in who have sailed away, but they just are hiding behind an island. And as soon as they see the fire signal, they're coming back, and they just obliterate Troy. They kill people left, right, and center, and take the rest as captives, as slaves. It's nasty. And yes.
That's where I went. Why did they let the folks in? That is the.
We're
It's a cool story, though.
Here's the thing.
10 years of war.
But
Here's the thing, Ethan.
They-
When they saw the horse, they just started horsing around with it where they found it.
But Sinon the trickster, the deceiver, convinced them, and he was apparently a very good actor. He was very good at it. That if you drag this in your city, you are unbeatable. And well, we'll sign up for unbeatable. I know. But okay, so I've noticed this with students, and I think I'm that way myself a little bit. We're very fact-oriented. Like, we want to explain all the details when we read a story, and sometimes have you ever seen a movie? Okay, you know, I love time travel movies. Some of you already know this. And so if it's a good time travel movie, there's always going to be flaws. Like, wait a minute, that couldn't happen. But if it's a really good one, you overlook the flaws. But if it's a bad one, you start saying, wait a minute, if he did that in the past, then this would get screwed up. It's those stories where you're willing to overlook the inconsistencies, and that ability to overlook the inconsistencies that we need to cultivate. I feel like modern people, me too, okay, like to pick it apart. And maybe there's stories you can't pick apart. You just need to enter into it. You need to be one of those people. They are desperate for peace after 10 years of war. They will do anything. You promise them that this is peace and this is unconquerableness, not sure that's a word, and they are in, right? And so it's a combination of putting ourselves in their place and just sort of suspending questions. What?
It's so immoral.
What immoral?
Immoral to just utilize somebody's wanting for peace and turn it into bloodshed.
Yes, but as they say,
It's the Romans.
It's a war.
okay, I'm going to say it, but I don't know that it's true. All's fair in love and war, as they say. Don't know that that's really true. But I think most people would consider deception of the enemy in wartime situations to be
A good move.
well,
Seven.
wisdom. All right, you know what? We can debate if it's ever okay to tell a lie under any circumstances another time. Actually, we're going to read Augustine's Confessions second semester, and he's going to talk about that. So how about we just visit with Augustine about whether we should ever tell lies. So he tells the story in book 2 of the fall, the night Troy fell, and I counted 4 prophetic moments. Did any of you find one? Can you give me one prophetic moment? That was the question on the bottom of page 4. What prophetic messages? What do you got?
You gotta go leave Troy before you die.
Okay, but who did he get the message from? That was the second part of the question. And from whom does he receive them?
His wife.
Okay, his wife. All right, let's go with that one first. That's page
Hector.
60.
It's
Okay, just a
Hector.
second. Let's do one at a time. Yes, that's another one. So his wife, okay, so Alex, I am sorry to inform you that his wife got separated from him and then just got killed somewhere. And then she shows up at the end of book 2 as a ghost. Time after time I groaned and called Creusa, and then to my vision her sad wraith appeared. Creusa's ghost, larger than life before me. And she says, "You may not take your Creusa with you now. It was not so ordained, nor does the Lord of High Olympus give you leave. For you long exile waits, and long sea miles to plow. You shall make landfall on Hesperia, where Lydian Tiber flows, with gentle pace between rich farmlands, and the years will bear glad peace, a kingdom and a queen for you. I'm dead. Go. You're going to get married again someday. It's going to be tough in the meantime, but it's all going to be good in the end. Paraphrasing Pious' message. Okay. I like it says Hector. We see Hector. He shows up on page 43 in my version of the book. 43 is line 360. I don't know. It says Hector appears to him in a dream, and he's not looking good. You know, he's all bloodied. It's like right after he got dragged behind Achilles' chariot over and over and over and over and over again. And he's not been fixed up by the gods yet. He's nasty, he's brutal, he's all bloody. And he tells Paris, I'm going to paraphrase for time, Troy is on fire. Wake up. This is the first of the messages he gets that night. You need to wake up and leave. It's going down. But the gods want you to live because you're going to rule over the Trojan refugees. Okay, Tatum, you had one. Is it one we didn't already say?
I was going to say Hector.
Oh, I guess I'm sorry. I also found his mother, Aeneas. And I love this one. You got to visit this one. This is on page 54. And it's line 790-ish, Ethan, in my version.
What page?
Page 54 of this, and line 790. Okay.
It's a different book. We're having a different book.
No, he knows, Kyle. I'm telling the page number for the people who have the same book as me. She said he wants to kill Helen. Aeneas finds Helen and like, that's it. She is bad news. She caused all this, and she's not going home to live a nice, cozy life with Menelaus and spin and, drug people at parties like she does in the Odyssey. She's not going to do that. But Venus says, you got it all wrong, Aeneas. She says this, it's not her fault. It's not Paris's fault. The harsh will of the gods it is. The gods that overthrows the splendor of this place and brings Troy from her height into the dust. Look over there. I'll tear away the cloud that curtains you and films your mortal sight, that fog around you. Have no fear of doing your mother's will or balk at obeying her. Now look, where you see the high masonry thrown down, stone torn from stone, with billowing smoke and dust, Neptune is shaking from their beds the walls with his great trident pried up, undermining, toppling the whole city down. And look, Juno, in all her savagery, holds the Scaean gates, and raging in steel armor calls her allied armies from the ship. Up on the citadel, turn, look, Pallas Tritonia, couched in a storm cloud, lightning with her Gorgon. Look, Aeneas, you can't, with your mortal eyes, see all these gods. I'm going to show you. The gods are attacking Troy. Troy's time was ticking down, and the time's run out. Paris and Helen was just a convenient excuse. But Troy's day has come. And you know what it reminds me? I think it's the prophet Elisha. The armies are attacking Israel, and he's got a servant with him, and he says, he prays that God will open his servant's eyes to the real situation. And when God does, the sky is filled with God's army. It was always there. But his servant couldn't see it. And so Venus pulls the veil away and she says, look, this is what's happening. Neptune's over there prying down walls with his trident, like a crowbar. The gods are taking it down. So you need to leave, because this isn't your fate. The last one I found was his son Iulus, aka Ascanius. Do you remember the moment that they look over and he's got a little flame flickering on his head, like his head starts glowing? I don't know why I feel compelled to do this, like it's going to help you remember. It says a point, page 57, a point on Iulus's head seemed to cast light, a tongue of flame that touched but did not burn him, licking his fine hair, playing around his temples. Now, there's no real explanation of this, But Grandpa Anchises says, look at its head, it's glowing. That's got to be a sign from the gods. Oh gods, if it is, confirm it. And then a big thunder on the left, which is always a sign the gods are giving you a message. They're not sure what it means, but it's got to be something weird. So
That
you get all these
seems to be
messages.
how these things work. We don't know what it is, but it's
You
something
gotta,
weird.
you know, you got to use your you got to roll with it if you're these guys. So he leaves Troy and he goes adventuring. And I forgot to mention it. Did you guys find that I gave you a map, like a supposed map? This is on page 6 in your reading notes. The voyages of Aeneas. I asked you, can we do the last question first? What experience does Aeneas go through that Odysseus also went through? Just name one.
He is shipwrecked in a strange land. He is
Okay.
among few survivors, and he is the leader of the crew.
Okay, shipwrecked with some people lost. He's their leader. What else? Ethan.
Very, very subtle, but there was a little bit of Cyclops action.
There was some Cyclops
Yes.
action. Yes.
They visited
Which,
Ireland.
did you notice? This is brilliant. Virgil just made this up as far as we know. The whole Aeneas is a Trojan and then he founded, Rome. That's not Virgil's idea. This was already a thing. But this whole Cyclops episode, he just made this up. So some poor friend of Odysseus's got stuck there. When they lit out, he didn't make it to the boat in time, and he's been dodging Cyclopes, I don't know, for a while. And he comes, this Greek guy, he's like, I don't care, you're Trojans, I don't care. Kill me if you want to, but you gotta get me off this place. This is awful. They're gonna eat me. And can you imagine if Odysseus had encountered a Trojan refugee there? Do you think he would have just welcomed him with open arms? I don't know. I mean, there's no answer to that because it didn't happen, but I don't know. I feel like this is very kind of Aeneas. You are a hated Greek, and you're even more hated because you're that jerk Odysseus's guy. And he's the biggest jerk of all the Greeks. But yeah, okay, come on board. I can't leave you to be eaten by the monsters. We pass Scylla and Charybdis. They mention Circe's island, but they don't stop there. Good for them. Aeolus and his winds cast them into a storm at the beginning. There's lots of repetition. So I'm just going to go. I hope they give me a clock next week. I'm going to go through the map, the stops, and just kind of run through the stops here. Stop number 1, land of Mars, it says. This is where he tries to build a city, and when he cuts things down and pulls things up, the ground groans and bleeds.
Oh, yeah.
When the ground groans and bleeds, go somewhere else. Don't do it. The story is that when Troy was still being attacked, Priam and Hecuba sent their youngest son Polydorus as a refugee to Thrace, to this king, and said, keep him safe, and also here's a bunch of gold and jewels and silver and stuff for him to inherit someday if something happens to us, and or for his support. Well, the moment the king found out Troy was gone, he just killed Polydorus, threw him in the ocean, took all his gold. But murder will out, as they say. His body washed ashore, and his spirit groaning under the ground tells Aeneas, I've been slaughtered, I need a decent burial, or at least the ritual performed so I can cross the river to the underworld. Don't build here. Great. So they go to Delos, island sacred to Apollo. And Apollo very not helpfully says, look for your mother. Okay. So we had some ancestor that came from Crete. Let's go to Crete. Also, it's close. Crete is not the place. They start building a city, then plague hits. This is not the place. Apollo now feels like he can tell them more information. No, it's Italy. You didn't get the whole your mother thing. It's Italy. Your distant ancestors came from Italy. So they head off to the Strophides, where we meet the Harpies. Jason and the Argonauts met the Harpies. I don't think Odysseus met the Harpies. Is it a short bit?
Yes.
Okay, make it short.
Here, Graham Solano and his sister Harpies settled after Phoenicius? P-H-I-N-E-U-S.
Aeneas, is he the guy that's stuck there? He's the guy that's stuck there with them.
Were locked against them all, and they fled here from the tables where they gorged. The Harpies, no monsters on earth more cruel, no scourge more savage, no wrath of the gods has ever raised its head from the Styx waters. The faces of the girls, but birds, a loathsome ooze discharges from their bellies, talons for hands, their jaws deathly white with a hunger never sated.
They're nasty. They're nasty. Girl heads, bird bodies, and it always talks about them when you have food, they foul it. You know, they poo on it. You know that's what they're doing. They poo all over your food. Plus the oozing belly thing can't be good for your food either. So they're bad news. They get rid of the Harpies. But one of the Harpies also gives him a prophecy and says, you know what, jerk? You go to Italy. You just do that. But I'll tell you what, before you get there, you're going to be so hungry, you're going to eat your tables. You're going to eat your tables. Shoot, no one, you have to be pretty hungry to eat the table, you know? That doesn't sound good. But they leave there, they head up to Actium, where they decide to have a pit stop and have a sporting event. I don't have anything to say about that. And then they head up to Buthrotum. That's the last question that I asked you. What has happened to Hector's wife, Andromache?
She remarried.
She remarried, and who did she remarry, do you know? Helenus, who was also, he's Hector's brother. She married her brother-in-law. He is a Trojan prophet, and they have a cozy little place. Does anybody remember what this place is like that they built?
What's the guy's name?
Helenus. Helenus and Andromache. And let me find it. Hang on. This is page 78. It's line 477 in book 3. I saw before me Troy in miniature, a slender copy of our massive tower, a dry brooklet named Xanthus, and I pressed my body against a Scaean gate. In the page before, we found out that Andromache has built an empty tomb, and she pours out offerings for her dead Hector. They built a new Troy, and I mean literally a new Troy. A baby Troy. Because guess what? They're still living in the past. Aeneas can't do that. And his final break with the past happens at the end of book 3. Not final, but a decisive break. His dad dies on Sicily. And then we're caught up to the present. They head out from Sicily, hoping to go to Italy, but they get caught in the storm that Juno stirred up in book 1, and they end up in Carthage. His first danger, I'm looking back. He said, I can't stay here with Hector and Andromache. I have a duty, even though it would be awesome to stay in baby Troy and love all these things that I know the names of and pretend it's the real Troy. But I can't stay here and pretend. So the next obstacle for our hero is, will he be distracted? He's not been pulled into the past. He's made it past. But is he going to be distracted? For next week, I would like you to read books 4 through 6 of the Aeneas and answer the questions. And I have something I would like you to write for me. And it is this. Now, some of you know exactly what I mean when I say this, but I'm going to explain from the very beginning as if you don't. because many people don't know what I mean. This week, I want you to write what I call a summa. A summa is and they're like, yay, I don't know what it is, but it must be good. A summa is a collection, a very concise collection of ideas. So this summa is one paragraph. It's only one paragraph. And I would like you to use this kind of practicing our paragraphs, you know? Paragraphs usually have a topic sentence at the beginning. You usually tell me, what is this paragraph about? And then you have sentences explaining whatever the topic is. And then you usually wrap it up with a sentence that usually mentions your topic again or brings it to a close, right? That's what paragraphs are built like. Here's what I want you to write. I will read it straight out. Why do you think Aeneas stays so long with Dido when he knows that Italy is his destiny? I will say it again. Why do you think Aeneas stays so long with Dido when he knows that Italy is his destiny? And I have a piece of advice for you. I'm actually going to say it one more time. Why do you think Aeneas stays so long with Dido when he knows that Italy is his destiny? I advise you to read book 4 before you write your paragraph. Book 4 will be illuminating on this subject, okay? And I said, why do you think? You get to give your opinion, but I'd love you to not just have random opinions, but actually back it up by something you read in the book. All right? It's easy to have random opinions, but not so easy to back it up sometimes. Okay? I think we're good, and it is time for you guys to go. So have a lovely week. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you next time.